Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Joseph Sonnier. Joseph Sonnier was born in 1955 to a respected family of doctors in Shreveport, Louisiana. From a young age, he aspired to follow in his family's footsteps and become a doctor. With exceptional abilities, Joseph earned a Bachelor of Science in Medical Science from the University of Baton Rouge in 1976. He then applied to Louisiana State University in Shreveport and began working at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Joseph effectively balanced his university studies and work. He consistently refined his knowledge through hands-on experience at the hospital. The hospital management recognized Joseph's success and dedication, and in his final year of training, he was appointed chief resident. After completing his studies, Joseph chose to specialize in pathologic anatomy and went on to become a pathologist and laboratory director in Leck, Texas. Joseph's life was marked by personal tragedy, including the loss of the woman he loved, Becky. His 27-year marriage, which he considered happy, ended in divorce when his wife fell in love with another man. Joseph accepted her decision and agreed to the divorce, believing that the woman he loved had found happiness. Joseph had a strong sense of responsibility and nobility. After his divorce from Becky, he maintained a warm relationship with her and continued to support their 2 sons. 2 years later, Becky was killed by her new husband. Joseph was shocked by her death. He often thought about their past family life and mourned her loss. Despite his own grief, Joseph remained a source of strength for his family. He took care of the funeral expenses and helped his sons cope with the trauma. His sons later credited his support for helping them overcome their pain. The tragedy had a profound impact on Joseph. He devoted himself to his work and raising his sons. However, the grief finally gave him the motivation to change his life. He decides to start a new chapter in a new city. In 2007, Joseph moved to Leck, Texas, with his sons, where he became the chief pathologist at Covenant Health System. Feeling the need for a change, Joseph enrolled in a local dance studio. He enjoyed the classes and met new women, which helped fill the void in his life. A few times, Joseph attempted to form connections with his dance partners, but it never worked out. That was until Michelle Tina walked into his dance class on a warm summer evening. Her elegance, poise, sense of humor, and sparkling eyes immediately caught his attention. Her radiant smile illuminated the room, and Joseph knew right then that she was the one he had been searching for. Michelle, too, noticed Joseph's confident and respectful demeanor on the dance floor. As they danced together, the 47-year-old Michelle and 57-year-old Joseph found that they complemented each other perfectly. As they continued to dance together, they grew closer with each passing session. Eventually, Joseph asked Michelle out on a date, and she agreed. This marked the beginning of what seemed like a happy new chapter in both of their lives. Michelle possessed an irresistible charm that had a profound effect on men. Michelle was a classic example of a femme fatale, a woman with an undeniable magnetism that drew attention and sparked passion in those around her. Michelle, like Joseph, is also starting a new life after personal emotional breakdowns. She is running away from the fear and anxiety associated with Mike Dixon, owner of a private clinic for cosmetic surgery. Michelle met Mike in 2008 when she came in for Botox injections. At first, there was just casual social interaction between them, then light flirting followed and they began a romance. Michelle is a successful and free woman. She worked as an executive in the NFL, built a successful career, and didn't lack for anything. Mike, on the other hand, is bound by his marriage. A few months after living a double life, his wife discovered his affair with Michelle and filed for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Mike is so captivated by Michelle that he barely notices that he is losing everything. Mike left his wife for Michelle, even though she never announced she would marry him. When Mike doesn't get the attention he expected, he tries to pressure Michelle, which scares her. Michelle recognized Mike's manipulative behavior and desire to take complete control of her life. This realization caused her to end the relationship. In 2010, Michelle and Mike went their separate ways. However, even after the breakup, Mike continued to pursue Michelle, urging her to return. His obsession exceeds the limit, forcing Michelle to find a way to escape Mike's control. Michelle moved to Lech to start anew, where she met Joseph, a charming and kind-hearted man. They quickly connected, and their relationship blossomed into true love. Joseph's sons and relatives welcomed Michelle with open arms. Joseph spared no expense in giving her gifts, taking her to the most luxurious restaurants and private clubs, and giving her romantic vacations. As Joseph realized he had found his perfect match, he took Michelle to Los Angeles and proposed to her in front of his entire family. Michelle, 47 at the time, was smitten with her new partner and frequently expressed her love for him on social media. However, her ex-lover, Mike Dixon, couldn't help but notice these declarations of love. Mike is furious when he discovers that Michelle has moved away and is planning to marry Joseph. He realized he couldn't win her back but still dared to propose that they rekindle their past relationship, suggesting they become lovers again. Michelle firmly rejected his proposal, refusing to engage in a love triangle, and immediately informed Joseph about Mike's suggestion. After some time, they started to feel like they were being watched. At one point, they even noticed something that looked like a camera flash through the backyard window, but they didn't pay much attention to it, not realizing the seriousness of the problem. The situation got out of control on July 11, 2012, when a gardener came to Joseph's house to discuss a garden renovation project. When the landscaper arrived at the home, he tried to contact Joseph but got no response. He saw an open door and, thinking Joseph might not be able to hear him, went inside. The house was in disarray, and there was a bullet hole near the front door, indicating a possible intruder. The landscaper cautiously went further inside, looking for Joseph. In the garage, he found Joseph lying in a pool of blood on the floor with no signs of life. Joseph's body had stab and gunshot wounds, leading the landscaper to think the perpetrator might be nearby. He immediately left the house and called for help. At 2:48 p.m., the police department received the call, and several patrol cars were sent to the scene. When the officers arrived, they found Joseph Sonnier. Medics confirmed that Joseph had died. The incident shocked the public, as it happened in one of the city's safest and most affluent neighborhoods, where crime is extremely rare. Joseph, a respected professional, was known for his calm and kind nature, and it seemed he had no enemies who would want to harm him. Although a window was broken, it was clear that the incident was not a robbery, as nothing was missing from the house. However, a bottle with a hole shot through its bottom was found at the scene, suggesting it was used as a makeshift silencer for a gun. A forensic team arrived soon after to collect evidence, and it appeared that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as they left behind many traces. DNA from the bottle and blood samples were sent to a lab for further analysis. Detectives interviewed neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious. There were no CCTV cameras near the house. According to the investigation, the perpetrator entered through a large window overlooking the backyard, making the attack unexpected. In the dining room, the attacker confronted Joseph and started shooting. It is likely that the wine bottle was used as a silencer at this point. Blood stains in the hallway suggested that Joseph was still alive after being shot. He entered the garage, where the attacker caught up with him and stabbed him multiple times. An autopsy revealed 5 gunshot wounds and 11 stab wounds. The circumstances suggested that the murder was not random, but the identity and motive of the killer remained unknown. The investigation focused on the people closest to the victim. During an interview with law enforcement, the victim's fiancée, Michelle, reported strange things in the months leading up to the murder. She believed Joseph was being stalked. Michelle had seen a stranger lurking outside Joseph's house, watching the door and windows. She also mentioned that Joseph had received persistent calls and texts in the period leading up to his death. Although officers confirmed this information, they initially thought the calls and messages were from other women with whom Joseph was allegedly having relationships, as witnesses claimed he was in contact with multiple women at the time. Investigators questioned Michelle about whether she knew of other women involved with Joseph. Michelle claimed she was unaware of any other women. Joseph's sons also denied the possibility of their father having mistresses, stating that infidelity was not in his character. Despite this, investigators continued to explore a motive of jealousy for the crime. During the subsequent interrogation, Michelle succumbs to the pressure and reveals that she knows several women who may be involved in the crime. According to Michelle, these women are ex-girlfriends who often stalk Joseph. Although he ignored them, they continued to express their displeasure about his upcoming wedding to Michelle. The women in question include a woman from Florida who persisted in contacting Joseph even after he revealed his relationship with Michelle. There was also a nurse, Joseph's colleague, who often called and wrote to him. Additionally, a woman whose daughter sent a letter accusing Joseph of abandoning them shortly before the murder. In the same interview, Michelle mentioned Mike Dixon for the first time. She hadn't thought about Mike spying on her and Joseph before, because Mike stopped paying attention to her after she refused to be his lover. Michelle assumed that Mike had accepted her decision to marry Joseph and move on with his own life. The police visited Mike. He cooperated and spoke with the detectives. Mike revealed that he had been deeply in love with Michelle and had even divorced his wife to pursue a future with her. However, after Michelle rejected him, Mike gave up. He started a new relationship with a younger medical student who corroborated his alibi. At the time of the crime, Mike was at work and then spent time with his new girlfriend, which confirmed he couldn't have been involved. The investigation encountered significant obstacles. Every suspect, including Michelle, had a solid alibi, leaving detectives stumped. They searched for enemies of Joseph or individuals who might benefit financially from his death. But no new leads emerged. Unfortunately, forensic analysis does not provide any information about an individual, so police cannot identify the owner of the DNA found at the crime scene. Just as the case seemed hopeless, the police received an unexpected call from Paul Reynolds. Reynolds reported that his roommate, David Shepard, had recently confessed to a murder in Leck and then attempted to take his own life but was saved. According to Reynolds, a neighbor shared specific details about David's crimes with him, including details that only a few detectives knew, such as the use of a glass bottle as a silencer. This new information led police to conclude that Shepard was indeed connected to the crime. The witness came forward claiming that David was not the mastermind behind the crime, but rather a person who was hired by an unknown doctor involved in plastic surgery. Police launched an investigation into the new suspect and discovered that Mike Dixon was the person who hired David. When questioned at the police station, David began to confess and revealed that Mike Dixon had indeed hired him to commit the crime. According to David, he and Mike met at a bar while both were going through difficult breakups and formed a friendship. Mike shared his sadness over his lost love, Michelle, who was now engaged to someone else. He claimed that he couldn't move on and was willing to do whatever it took to win her back. David alleged that the initial plan was to discredit Joseph, Michelle's current partner, in the hopes that Michelle would leave him and return to Mike. However, David claimed that murder was not part of the original plan. First, women were paid $1,000 each to pretend to be Joseph's mistresses and pursue him. Additionally, a letter arrived from a woman claiming Joseph had abandoned her and their child. Joseph consistently denied these allegations, and Michelle believed him. It was later revealed that the camera flash seen by the couple was actually the light from David's cell phone flashlight. David had been driving to their house to create the illusion of surveillance. Funded by Mike Dixon, who covered gas and other expenses. When these tactics failed to break the couple apart, Mike plotted a more extreme solution. He offered David 3 silver bars, valued at around $110,000, to kill the pathologist. David agreed and received one of the bars as a deposit, which he immediately sold at a pawn shop. According to David Shepard, the situation escalated out of control when he went to Joseph's house. He claimed the shooting was unintentional, and that after shooting Joseph, he became afraid and Joseph began to run away. David shouted to check on Joseph but received no response. He then followed Joseph into the garage, where he found Joseph lying still and heard his last breath. David rushed to check Joseph's pulse and confirmed that Joseph was dead. David admitted to stabbing Joseph several times but could not remember the exact number. David also admitted that he considered calling for help using Joseph's phone, but ultimately chose not to. Instead, he put the phone back, mutilated Joseph's body, and then went to Mike's house to get the rest of the gold before attempting to take his own life. According to David, he didn't fully understand what he was getting himself into. When he faced Joseph, he realized he could not continue killing. If it weren't for an accidental gunshot, Joseph might still be alive. Mike Dixon was arrested by the police on the same day and charged with first-degree murder. This was based on testimony from David, as well as a large amount of other evidence that included incriminating phone calls and text messages where Mike made explicit confessions. When Mike Dixon was first interviewed by detectives, they had hoped he would confess to the crime. However, he denied everything and asked for a lawyer, which led to a lawsuit. David Shepard, who had been involved in the crime, made a deal with the prosecutor where he pleaded guilty to his role and gave up his right to appeal the sentence. As a result of this deal, David received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, instead of the death penalty. Mike Dixon, on the other hand, maintained that he was not guilty, despite the circumstantial evidence against him. However, in a surprising turn of events, David, who was a key witness for the prosecution, changed his story during the trial. Under oath, David claimed that he had committed the crime alone and that Mike Dixon was not involved. He said that the silver bars found at the scene were meant to be used as an investment in a business that the two of them had planned to start. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and a retrial was declared. The second trial occurred in 2016, resulting in Mike's conviction for first-degree murder and a life sentence without parole. However, his lawyers successfully appealed the judgment, and it was overturned. Mike was released on $2 million bail, but the case was far from over. The prosecution sought to reinstate the original sentence through the state's highest criminal court, which would have otherwise led to a third trial. On February 11, 2019, the prosecution's motion was granted, and in April 2020, Mike's bail was revoked, prompting a new arrest warrant. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ultimately reversed the lower court's decision, reinstating Mike's life sentence without parole. The judge ordered Mike to continue serving his sentence, and he is currently incarcerated in a Texas prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their 3rd child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her two young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25 with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired 2 experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Channin Christian. Hugh Christopher Newson Jr., commonly known as Chris, was born on September 21, 1983, in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Mary and Hugh Newson, who raised him in a loving and large family. As the youngest child, he was deeply adored by his family members. During his youth, Chris showcased exceptional athletic abilities, particularly excelling in baseball throughout his school years. His coach firmly believed that he had a promising future in the sport, but a severe injury and the subsequent prolonged recovery process, unfortunately, ended his athletic career. Despite this setback, Chris possessed a multitude of talents. He was an unskilled artist, a proficient guitar player, had impressive woodworking skills, and possessed in-depth knowledge about cars and motorcycles, having dreamed of becoming a mechanic during his youth. Following high school, Chris's passion for carpentry took center stage, leading him to attend the prestigious University of Tennessee, where he proved to be a diligent student, consistently ranking among the top of his class. Channin Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas, to Dina and Gary Christian, the younger of their 2 children. She grew up with her older brother Chase, with whom she had a close and loving relationship. What made their birth even more special was that their mother, Dina, had been diagnosed with infertility in her younger years, making the arrival of her 2 children a remarkable blessing. In 1997, the Christian family relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools and their parents started a thriving family business. Dina worked from home, conducting individual psychotherapy sessions, while Channin, who shared her mother's passion for psychology, was an outgoing and kind-hearted individual. After high school, Channin went on to study sociology at the University of Tennessee and worked part-time to save up for her dream car. On her 21st birthday, her parents and brother helped make her dream a reality by contributing towards the purchase of a silver Toyota 4Runner. In the same month, Channin and Christopher were invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. Channin visited a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration and parked her car in a nearby underground garage where they had planned to meet. However, Christopher was delayed, leading to a brief argument between them as they were running late for the event. As they failed to show up at the party, their friends became increasingly worried, knowing that it was unlike them to miss an event without notification. Attempts to reach them on their phones were unsuccessful. Channin's friend called her mom repeatedly, getting no response. The next morning, Dina noticed Channin hadn't come home. At first, she thought Channin might have stayed at Chris's after the party or gone to work from there. But when she saw missed calls from an unknown number, her concern grew. The caller said Channin and Chris never showed up to the party and weren't answering their phones. Dina feared the worst, and Chris's parents were equally worried, thinking he was at Channin's. Channin's parents grew anxious when they found out she, like Chris, had missed work. They contacted police, but the officer was unhelpful, suggesting the couple just wanted alone time. The parents took matters into their own hands, launching a search effort with friends, contacting acquaintances, visiting hospitals, and spreading the word on social media. Despite their efforts, no useful leads emerged. Channin was last seen at a beauty salon on Saturday, chatting about an upcoming party. It wasn't until Monday, January 8th, that the police officially launched their investigation into the disappearance of Channin Christian and Christopher Newson. By then, Thanks to the tireless efforts of their parents and friends, the entire city was aware of the missing couple. The previous day, rumors had begun circulating about a disturbing discovery near the railroad tracks, although no concrete details were available. A railroad worker, while inspecting the tracks in his designated area, discovered badly damaged human remains on the embankment beside the tracks. The body was in a gruesome state, with multiple injuries, and had been drenched in a flammable liquid in an attempt to set it on fire. Upon responding to the scene, the police cordoned off the area and conducted a meticulous examination, but were unable to find any significant clues or leads. After taking necessary photographs, the remains were sent to the morgue for an autopsy to establish the cause of death and attempt to identify the victim, although it was clear that the extensive damage and effects of the fire would make this challenging. Forensic experts determined that the body belonged to a young man who had suffered a brutal and prolonged death. The victim had sustained multiple injuries while still alive, indicating a severe and lengthy assault. Almost all of his teeth had been knocked out or damaged by blows, and he had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and a final fatal shot to the head. Furthermore, traces of seminal fluid from at least 3 different men were found in his body, along with distinctive tears suggesting repeated violent assaults. When police reviewed recent reports of missing young men, they found that Christopher Newson matched the description in terms of age, height, and build. The officers then contacted his parents and asked for DNA samples to confirm the identity, while strongly advising them against viewing the body at the morgue due to its badly burned and unrecognizable state. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis subsequently confirmed that the body was indeed that of the missing student, Christopher Newson. The search for Channon continued, despite the distressing news about Christopher. Channon Christian's parents were still holding on to the hope that their daughter was alive, possibly being held captive somewhere. The last known location of her mobile phone was in one of Knoxville's more troubled neighborhoods on the day the couple disappeared, which suggested that they might have been taken there against their will. This led the parents to believe that Channon might still be being held in that area. In a secluded alley of this neighborhood, Channon's Toyota 4Runner was discovered abandoned and in a terrible state. The SUV was dirty, scratched, and had broken headlights and deflated tires. Additionally, all of Channon's personal belongings were missing, and the car was littered with cigarette butts. The seats were torn and stained, and the driver's seat was pushed far back, indicating that a large adult male had last driven the vehicle. A crumpled envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found on the floor between the seats, likely dropped by the perpetrator. A local witness reported seeing 4 African-American males driving the SUV that Saturday evening, which stood out in that area. The fingerprints on the envelope led the police to Lamas Davidson, a man with prior convictions for serious offenses. His residence, located in an industrial area near a wasteland, had no witnesses. When no one responded to the police's knock and offered to surrender, they forced entry, hoping to find Channon alive inside. Inside the house, the police found Channon's purse, a stuffed toy from her car, Christopher's headphones and baseball cap, and a knife with blood traces. They also discovered torn and blood-stained fragments of women's clothing and, tragically, Channon's lifeless body hidden in the house's trash chute system, wrapped in 5 trash bags and bound in the fetal position under dirty sheets. Experts later determined that she likely died in the early hours of Monday, January 8th. The discovery of Channon Christian's body revealed a terrifying sequence of events. Had the police begun their search immediately, they might have saved her from unimaginable suffering. Instead, her body was found with every inch covered in bruises, abrasions, cuts, and cigarette burns. The numerous injuries to her genital area, mouth and throat indicated that she had been subjected to multiple brutal assaults by several men. Channon suffered a severe head injury, internal bleeding in her abdominal area, likely caused by kicks. Multiple stab wounds, though not fatal, were inflicted upon her. Her attackers also extinguished dozens of cigarettes on her skin in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. They doused her with household bleach, focusing on bleeding wounds and her genital area. She was then forced to ingest bleach. 5 individuals were involved in the brutal crimes against Channing Christian and Christopher Newsom. Lamarcus Davidson, the owner of the house where Channing's mutilated body and Chris's personal belongings were found, was identified as a fugitive. The police also tracked down Eric Boyd, whose DNA was found at the crime scene. Boyd was arrested on January 11th without resisting and agreed to cooperate with the investigation, stating he wouldn't take the fall for crimes he didn't commit. Boyd revealed that Davidson was hiding in a vacant house listed for sale and personally led the police to the location. As a result, Davidson was caught off guard and offered no resistance. Notably, at the time of his arrest, Davidson was wearing Chris's sneakers. During the investigation, Davidson downplayed his role, portraying himself as a victim. He claimed that the couple had come to his house to buy illegal substances, but got caught up in a conflict with his acquaintances. Davidson insisted that he left to avoid involvement, and the subsequent brutal acts occurred while he was away. Further investigation led to the identification of 3 more individuals involved in the case: Davidson's friend George Thomas, his half-brother Latalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Lynn Coleman, an 18-year-old woman. Once all 5 suspects were arrested, they were put in separate cells and questioned one by one. Each of them tried to shift the blame onto the others, unknowingly providing details of the brutal crime. The pieces of their stories helped to reconstruct the sequence of events and the role each played in the brutal act. Lamarcus Davidson, recently released from prison on parole, was in dire need of money. To support his illegal business of selling banned substances, he urgently needed a vehicle to deliver his goods to customers. Davidson decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot notorious for its lack of surveillance cameras, accompanied by his accomplices. Tragically, students Channing and Christopher were in the parking lot at the same time, arguing over Chris's delay. The criminals, fearing witnesses, forced the couple into the trunk of a car at gunpoint. They was taken to Davidson's house, where they were subjected to brutal beating and repeated assault. After midnight, Christopher, barefoot and undressed, was forced back into the trunk and taken to the railroad tracks. He was ordered to walk on the stones before being shot twice in the back. The final shot to the head ended his suffering. His body was then doused with a flammable liquid and set on fire in an attempt to destroy any evidence that could lead to the perpetrators. After dealing with Christopher, the criminals returned to the house where Channing remained bound. The next day, she endured horrific cruelty, leaving her with no uninjured area on her body. The sadists concluded their torture by dousing her with bleach and packing her, still alive, into plastic trash bags, where she slowly suffocated. The exact moment Vanessa Coleman joined the group is unknown. In her interrogations, Coleman claimed she was a hostage who participated in the torture out of fear for her life. However, Boyd said Coleman was Davidson's girlfriend and willingly took part in the events, even taking Channing's jewelry and mobile phone. Moreover, a diary found at Coleman's home described the horrors at her boyfriend's house, which she called an exciting adventure. During the trials, it was established that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, led the criminal group and instigated the brutal acts against the victims. Although Davidson tried to shift the blame, claiming the couple had come to buy drugs and engaged in consensual rough sex that got out of control, the evidence proved otherwise. Davidson was found guilty on 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and cruel and premeditated murder. The jury unanimously sentenced him to death for his heinous crimes. Latalvis Cobbins, born 1982, was initially faced with the death penalty for his role in the brutal torture, assaults, and murder. However, he was ultimately handed a life imprisonment sentence without parole. George Thomas, born 1983, received a similar life sentence for his involvement in the same heinous crimes, with no possibility of release. Eric Boyd, who cooperated with the investigation and aided in the capture of Davidson, received an 18-year prison sentence. The investigation discovered Vanessa Coleman's, born 1988, involvement in the torture, assaults, and tragic murder of Channon. She was subsequently sentenced to 53 years imprisonment. In 2011, while the convicted felons served their sentences and Davidson awaited execution, the case took an unexpected turn. The presiding judge resigned, citing substance dependency issues, which called into question his ability to conduct the trial fairly. As a result, all verdicts from the previous 2 years were annulled, and new hearings were scheduled for the 5 individuals responsible for the tragic murder of the students. After retrials, Davidson's death sentence was upheld. Cobbins and Thomas both remained incarcerated, each serving a life sentence without parole. However, Thomas's sentence was later modified to include the possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman's original 53-year sentence was reduced to 35 years. Although her 2014 appeal was rejected and parole was denied in 2017, she will remain incarcerated until at least April 2032, as determined by the parole board in 2020. Eric Boyd's circumstances drastically changed. Initially, he got a short sentence for cooperating, but was later retried and received life without parole for his role in the assaults and deaths of 2 victims. His accomplice Thomas testified against him, revealing new details, and got a 15% sentence reduction. Boyd's appeals failed, and he's now serving life at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Davidson awaits execution in Riverbend Max Security. The trial sparked media frenzy, leading to 2 new laws. One protects victims from defamation by the accused, who try to shift blame. The other eliminates the need for a judge's signature on a unanimous verdict, preventing retrials and sentence reviews. The house where Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom were brutally tortured was demolished in 2008. A memorial was built on the site in their memory. A charity foundation and golf tournament were established in Christian's name to support violence victims. A foundation in Newsom's name hosts annual baseball tournaments and awards a scholarship in his memory. Initial media reports of the case were inaccurate, sparking public outcry. Some believed racial bias played a role, given the victims were white and perpetrators African American. However, experts and the police chief found no evidence to support this claim, nor that the case would have received more attention if the races were reversed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Cave. Jennifer was born in March 1984 near Bishop, Texas, where her family lived in a modest farmhouse. Her mother, Sharon, was in her second marriage, which added 3 children to the family: Jennifer, Lauren, and Clayton. Vanessa, from Sharon's first marriage, was the oldest sibling. Jennifer's father, Charlie, worked as a welder and was a decent husband and father, until his alcoholism turned him into a mean and unbearable person who would hurl insults and cause trouble. When he was sober, he was calm and respectable. Sharon's family stayed close despite their unstable home. She worked at a chemical plant and cared for the kids. Jennifer, unlike her outgoing siblings, was shy and book-smart, developing exceptional memory. However, her love for reading affected her eyesight, requiring glasses, which didn't boost her self-esteem, but didn't stop her from participating in school activities. Eventually, her father's destructive drinking habit caused her family to break apart. After the separation, Jennifer and her brother Clayton chose to stay with their father, Charlie. They showed him great compassion and tried to support him in overcoming his addiction, hoping to prevent his downfall. Jennifer was so desperate to help her father quit drinking that she ignored his lack of determination to fight his habit. 4 years after her parents' divorce, in 1999, Sharon met Jim Sedgwick, a new partner. As Jennifer entered her teenage years, she underwent a transformation. She got rid of her braces and contact lenses and replaced her glasses, which brought out her natural beauty. However, her personality began to change along with her physical appearance. She started socializing with kids from troubled families, but thanks to her high intelligence, she managed to graduate at the top of her class. Jennifer majored in finance at Texas State University, but soon became disillusioned, withdrawing after one semester. She then attended community college, worked part-time, and dated Mark from a respectable family. However, she began frequenting parties, drinking heavily, and using marijuana, possibly influenced by her father's substance abuse. On one fateful night, Jennifer Cave's life took a tragic turn when she met Colton Panic. A gunshot wound to her right arm ultimately led to her demise. The bullet pierced her arm and chest, striking her heart, causing rapid blood loss from a vital artery. Further examination revealed multiple stab wounds across her body, with the most severe injuries on her chest and neck. The attacker inflicted a total of 18 stab wounds after she had died. In an attempt to conceal the body, the perpetrator decapitated Jennifer and shot her through the throat into her head. They then tried to dismember her by severing her upper limbs and placed them in prepared bags and trash bags. The torso was left in the bathtub, covered with a saw. However, something disrupted the initial plan, forcing the perpetrator to change their actions. Upon discovering Jennifer's body, the police arrived but lacked a warrant to search Colton Patak's apartment. Initially, they could only observe the scene and secure the area. After obtaining the necessary warrant, a thorough search of the apartment was conducted. The investigation turned up 3.38 caliber shell casings, and the firearm was found in Patak's car, parked in the garage. A large, blood-stained machete was recovered from the dishwasher. Toxicology reports showed that Jennifer had alcohol, marijuana, and methamphetamine in her system at the time of her death. In one of the rooms, investigators found a road atlas with certain pages torn out, specifically those highlighting routes in southwest Texas. This discovery provided a crucial clue, suggesting the reason behind the apartment owner's sudden disappearance. Colton Panic had fled the area. As a result, law enforcement immediately issued a warrant for his arrest. Colton was born in Bryant, Arkansas, and grew up to be a charming and clever boy who was popular among his female peers during his teenage years. His father's successful agricultural business provided the family with a comfortable lifestyle. However, this comfort seemed to spoil Colton, making him both ambitious and hot-tempered. In his free time, Colton was passionate about skateboarding and playing the guitar. He attended a Catholic boys' middle school in Little Rock, where he excelled academically, frequently making the honor roll. He was also a National Merit Scholarship finalist in 2000. By his senior year, Colton had started to get into trouble with alcohol and fights, largely due to his association with a group of wealthy kids who lived a life of leisure, often hosting parties with undesirable consequences. Despite these problems, his high graduation scores secured him admission to the University of Texas at Austin. Unfortunately, he failed to focus on his studies, instead continuing his reckless lifestyle, losing friends, and earning a reputation as a frequent drinker and marijuana user. If not for his self-destructive tendencies, Colton could have had a bright future. Colton was kicked out of his university fraternity and began selling drugs. His parents tried to help him overcome his addiction, even going so far as to take him back in at home. In the spring of 2004, Colton met Jennifer at a party, and they immediately clicked. Despite her tendency to idealize people, Jennifer decided to take a chance on Colton rather than walk away from the potentially dangerous relationship. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. As their relationship grew, Jennifer started using illegal drugs with Colton. His apartment, once luxurious, became a hub of excess, with drug use becoming a normal part of their daily lives. As a result, Jennifer's addiction worsened. Her parents repeatedly attempted to intervene, even giving her a car in the hopes that she would spend more time at home. However, each time she returned, her promises to change were short-lived. Colton's condition deteriorated, and he became increasingly paranoid. In an attempt to emulate a gangster, he started carrying a gun and knife. In 2004, he was arrested for possessing illegal substances and even attended a rehabilitation program, but he showed no genuine commitment to overcoming his addiction. Jennifer's parents visited her, but the visit was disappointing. She had failed to keep her promises, had lost a significant amount of weight, and looked unwell. Her family suggested she seek treatment at a rehabilitation center, but she refused outright. This upset her parents, Sharon and Jim, who then cut off her financial support, hoping that their tough love approach would motivate her to take control of her life. With no money, Jennifer had no choice but to move in with Colton. What happened between Jennifer and Colton in his apartment remains unclear, but after living with him for a month, Jennifer made the decision to leave. A friend came to her rescue, offering a room and emotional support. Although Jennifer confided in her friend about her fears and no longer felt safe around Colton, she chose not to elaborate on the details. Whatever it was, it clearly terrified her, and she refused to consider getting back together. When Colton showed up asking her to take him back, Jennifer stood firm in her decision. Her resolve only strengthened when she noticed he was carrying a knife. She urged him to calm down and suggested they maintain a platonic relationship instead. To her surprise, he agreed. From then on, Jennifer kept her distance from Colton and began rebuilding her relationship with her parents. For the first time, her life was slowly getting back on track. In early 2005, Jennifer started dating Scott, a single father who seemed like a breath of fresh air. Unlike Colton, Scott led a stable life, working as a waiter, playing keyboards in a band, and singing, all while staying sober. As they spent more time together, Jennifer's self-confidence grew, and she even looked healthier by his side. She took on a maternal role, caring for Scott's daughter and keeping their home. However, she still had a lingering fear that she might flee at a moment's notice if Colton were to call her again. Colton moved to the Orange Tree Apartments near the university after Laura Hall arrived. The complex had a pool, making it a party spot. Colton's behavior remained unpredictable, with friends reporting he played Russian roulette alone. It was at one of these parties he met Laura Ashley Hall, who became infatuated with him. She showed jealousy towards other women, especially Jennifer, and came across as arrogant to their peers. Colton and Laura started dating soon after. Like Jennifer, Laura was deeply drawn to Colton. When he was sentenced to 60 days in jail in June 2005, Laura sent him all her earnings, even going into debt. Friends noticed that she changed for the worse, becoming bolder, neglecting her job and personal care. Many believed she had also started using banned drugs. Unlike his behavior with Jennifer, Colton disregarded Laura's feelings, even going so far as to extinguish cigarettes on her. During this period, Jennifer broke up with Scott because she felt unworthy of his family and didn't want to cause them any problems. Although she occasionally talked to Colton, who still had feelings for her, she kept their conversations friendly and didn't rekindle their romance. Jennifer's main focus was on finding a job and going back to college. In August, things started looking up for her. She began dating Michael Rodriguez, and after completing a few days of training, landed a great job at a law firm. Jennifer felt proud of herself and was genuinely happy. On August 16th, she decided to celebrate her new life with friends. They went to a bar and then a club that evening. According to a friend, the bouncer refused to let Colton in because of his appearance, which might have led him to look for drugs. The investigation is ongoing to uncover what happened that fateful night. Investigators interviewed Colton's neighbors and discovered some interesting information. At around 3 a.m. on August 17th, Nora Sullivan heard a knock on her door and found Colton standing there, looking suspicious with blood on him and a visible gun at his waist. Startled, she asked him what had happened, and Colton claimed he had been in a shootout with some people. However, Nora didn't hear any gunshots and thought he was lying, as he often did. She closed the door and peeked through the peephole to see him eventually walk away. When questioned, none of the neighbors reported hearing any gunshots that night either. Detectives discovered that Colton had been in contact with Laura twice on the night of the murder. The next morning, August 17th, he visited a hardware store where he bought a saw, masks, gloves, and a large quantity of cleaning supplies. He used these items to dismember Jennifer's body and planned to clean the apartment to destroy any evidence of the crime. The unexpected arrival of Sharon and Jim may have startled him, causing him to flee. A crucial discovery in Colton's apartment led investigators straight to him. Colton, accompanied by Laura Hall, was tracked down in Mexico, where they had crossed the border in Laura's car. During this time, local authorities distributed Colton's photo nationwide. The couple enjoyed themselves in Mexico, visiting cinemas and restaurants, and stayed in a hotel in the border town of Piedras Negras. An employee at the hotel recognized Colton from the distributed photo and took his picture, sending it to the police. Mexican law enforcement arrested the pair and handed them over to U.S. officials at the border. Before being released, Laura Hall caused a scene with the Border Patrol, loudly proclaiming Colton's innocence and hindering the arrest process. However, she later admitted that their trip to Mexico was the best experience of her life. In total, they spent around 5 days abroad. On August 23, 2005, Colton Poniak was arrested and charged with a crime related to Jennifer Cave's death. A month later, Laura Hall was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence and obstructing justice. During the trial, prosecutors presented key evidence found in the apartment, including a store videotape and a receipt for items purchased. Colton claimed he had no memory of the night of August 16th-17th, blaming his amnesia on heavy drinking and illegal drug use. Initially, he didn't deny involvement in Jennifer's death, but insisted he had no recollection of the events. He claimed to have woken up to find his ex-girlfriend's body in the bathroom, and then contacted Laura, who allegedly advised him to buy a saw and cleaning supplies. Together, they allegedly dismembered the victim and hid the body parts in bags. Prosecutors argued that Laura was responsible for Jennifer's injuries after her death. Colton later implied that Laura might have been motivated by jealousy, suggesting she sought revenge against a romantic rival. Despite these allegations, both Colton and Laura pleaded not guilty. The evidence of Colton's involvement in the crime was overwhelming. His fingerprints and DNA were found on the machete, saw, and firearm at the crime scene, and the weapon in his car was identified as the one used in the crime. Additionally, Jennifer's body was found in his apartment, and he was the one who purchased the cleaning supplies from the store. The jury had no doubt of his guilt. On January 29, 2007, Colton Poniak was sentenced to 55 years in prison with parole eligibility after serving at least half of his sentence, with his earliest release date set for 2060. The case against Laura Hall was more complex. The prosecution argued that she might have acted out of blind affection for Colton. While Laura's DNA was found on one of the victim's shoes, a store towel, and the firearm, the defense contended that this only indicated her involvement in disposing of the body, not in the initial act. They couldn't prove she was the one who fired the first shot that hit Jennifer in the head. Moreover, there was no evidence that placed her at the scene at the time of the crime. Laura maintained that she only learned of the crime when Colton told her, and claimed he forced her to flee to Mexico with him. However, witnesses from their time in Mexico reported that they seemed to enjoy their trip in 2007, which cast doubt on Laura's story. Laura Hall was convicted of obstructing justice and tampering with evidence and received a 6-year prison sentence. In a subsequent trial in 2010, she was given the maximum sentence of 11 years and a $144,000 fine. She was paroled on March 15, 2018, with GPS monitoring, and completed her sentence in August of the same year. However, her current whereabouts are unknown. Colton Poniak is still in prison, where he has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been unsuccessful. Throughout these appeals, he has consistently claimed to have no memory of the tragic events of that night. However, He has revealed that there are witnesses who claim Laura confessed to Jennifer's death. Ponak alleges that during the trial, the prosecutors were aware of this information, but failed to disclose it to his defense team, suggesting that he may have been set up. Although Ponak's legal motions were denied, this revelation has raised questions among the public. Moreover, Jennifer's parents believe that Laura's punishment was too lenient. They are convinced that she played a more significant role in Jennifer's death than she admits. Unlike Colton, Laura has never expressed remorse or regret for Jennifer's death, often referring to her as that girl or the dead girl, and sometimes using derogatory terms. To this day, the specifics of that fateful night remain a mystery. Jennifer is the only one who knows the truth that the walls of Ponak's residence keep hidden. Unfortunately, the dead cannot reveal their secrets. Jennifer's life was tragically cut short in its prime. If only she had realized sooner that staying away from certain people and cutting off ties with them can be a means of self-preservation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley. Her parents divorced, and her mother later married Bruce Jimon. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Coleman Ashel Lepum, Melissa Jameson, and a brother, Neil Hatcher. Kendra grew up in Pleasant Plains, where she studied dentistry. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone, a dental studio. As a devout Christian, Kendra wanted to use her dental skills to help others, providing free services to disadvantaged children at the clinic. In her spare time, Kendra was involved in various activities, including teaching Bible studies and participating in volunteer programs. These programs involved building churches abroad and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. After moving to Dallas, Kendra's professional career took off rapidly. Her personal life also began to blossom when she met Dr. Ricardo Palacios through a dating app on May 24, 2015. Kendra and Ricardo shared similar values, interests, and life goals. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having only been together for a few months, they were already discussing their upcoming marriage. A tragic incident in a parking lot took the life of Kendra, cutting short all their future plans. Upon arriving at the crime scene, investigators examined the evidence and initially suspected robbery as the motive, given that Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. They found bullet fragments and a gun magazine near her body. However, the circumstances of the shooting and the bullet wounds suggested that robbery was not the primary motive. One bullet struck Kendra in the back, while the other hit her in the head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, and the bullet exited through her chin, indicating that she had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was later confirmed when investigators obtained CCTV footage and reconstructed the events. The footage showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. 30 minutes later, Kendra returned home and parked in the same garage. Shortly after, a man approached her, shot her, and then ran to the side before jumping into the Jeep and driving off. Although the video quality was poor and the crime scene was not clearly visible, the authorities were unable to identify the assailant. However, they put the vehicle on a wanted list and appealed to the public for assistance. A man named Ortiz contacted the police after recognizing his car and footage related to the shooting. Ortiz claimed that, although the car belonged to him, he was not involved in the shooting and was not driving it at the time. He explained that, on the morning of September 2nd, he had lent his Jeep to 2 of his girlfriends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, who asked to borrow it until the evening. Later that evening, Brenda called Ortiz to meet her at a restaurant where they were at the time of the crime. Meanwhile, Crystal Cortez drove the Jeep back to Ortiz's house. When Ortiz saw his Jeep on the TV news, he confronted Brenda, who initially denied that it was his Jeep. then admitted that Crystal had used it without his knowledge. Brenda tried to persuade Ortiz not to report the incident, offering to pay to have the Jeep repainted. At first, Ortiz was hesitant to get involved with the police, fearing it might jeopardize his pending U.S. citizenship. However, he eventually decided to cooperate and provided the police with the names of Brenda and Crystal. The police then tracked the movements of the Jeep on the day of the crime and located the two women. Brenda Delgado was the first to be questioned, but she claimed to have no knowledge of Kendra Hatcher and provided an alibi, stating she was at a restaurant with Ortiz at the time of the crime and produced receipts as proof. However, as the investigation continued, the truth slowly emerged, revealing the attempts by the perpetrators to conceal their involvement. Brenda Delgado came from a modest family. Her parents, Luis and Maria, immigrated to Dallas from Mexico, where her father worked in a factory. Brenda excelled academically and dreamed of attending medical school, but her parents couldn't afford the tuition. After high school, she continued to live with her parents, working as a dental assistant and at a spa, while still aspiring to a more affluent and beautiful life. Brenda balanced her dental assistant job with spa work, where she whitened her teeth. In 2012, she fell for Ricardo at a Jennifer Lopez concert. 3 months later, she moved in with him. Ricardo was smitten, meeting her parents, and Brenda gushed about her love in a Facebook birthday post. Brenda discovered she was pregnant, but Ricardo convinced her to have an abortion, leaving her devastated. After recovering from the ordeal, Brenda focused on her career and her beloved Ricky. She enrolled in Stanford that fall. Although it seemed like Brenda had moved on from the breakup, she was still hurting. Her obsession with Ricardo intensified, and when Ricky posted a photo with his new girlfriend, Kendra, a model-like beauty, Brenda was consumed by dark thoughts. Those close to her claimed she fantasized about harming Kendra. Investigators suspected Brenda had a strong motive to harm her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda Delgado was his ex-girlfriend, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship from 2012 to 2015. They broke up a few months before Ricky met Kendra. Despite this, Ricardo believed he and Brenda remained friends and didn't think there was any bad blood between Brenda and Kendra. The reconstructed events revealed a disturbing picture of how manipulative and ruthless an abused woman can be. Brenda Delgado concocted a sinister plan to win back her former lover, Ricardo, and eliminate Kendra Hatcher, the woman he had moved on to. Initially, Brenda posed as Ricardo's supportive friend, pretending to take an interest in his relationship with Kendra. Unbeknownst to Ricardo, she gathered information about their future plans, which he naively believed was genuine concern. After Kendra's death, Ricardo confided in Brenda via text message, pouring out his grief. Brenda feigned sympathy, offering to help him in any way possible. Unaware of her true intentions, Ricardo trusted her completely. What he didn't know was that Brenda had been secretly manipulating him for months. She had been snooping on his mail, learning about his plans with Kendra, including their travel arrangements. This discovery fueled her anger, and she became fixated on eliminating Kendra, whom she believed had usurped her place in Ricardo's life. Brenda took control of Ricardo's phone account and used it to stalk him, keeping close tabs on his activities and those of his girlfriend Kendra. This obsession soon became her sole purpose in life. Brenda's fixation on stalking eventually led her to quit her job and dedicate all her time to achieving her twisted goals. Over time, she devised a cruel and terrifying plan to murder Kendra and take her place beside Ricardo. To put her plan into action, Brenda approached several acquaintances with an offer to harm Kendra in exchange for money. She eventually found a 21-year-old single mother, Crystal Cortez, who was struggling financially and willing to assist her. Crystal recruited a perpetrator, Christopher Love, who agreed to commit the crime. Brenda paid Crystal $500 and provided her with illegal substances, which Crystal then passed on to Christopher. Several women were tasked with following Kendra to learn her daily routines and identify the best location and time to carry out the crime. On September 2nd, 2015, they borrowed Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher lay in wait for Kendra in the parking lot, but lost their nerve and didn't follow her home from work due to fear of getting stuck in traffic. Later that evening, they finally carried out their sinister plan and were rewarded for their efforts. A few days after the crime, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love were arrested. They both denied any involvement in the crime and claimed they were not at the scene. However, when the police found the murder weapon in the car, Love's story fell apart. Meanwhile, Crystal's alibi was inconsistent and confusing. At first, she claimed she was driving in the parking lot because an armed carjacker had taken over her SUV and forced her there. She even falsely stated that her young son was with her, but surveillance cameras showed no evidence of a child. As the investigation continued and more evidence emerged, Crystal changed her story again, this time offering to cooperate with the police in exchange for a reduced sentence. She implicated Brenda, claiming that she was the mastermind behind the crime and that they had been planning it for 2 weeks. According to Crystal, Brenda's obsession with winning back her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo, drove her to despise Kendra, whom she believed had taken her place. Brenda had pretended to be happy for Ricardo, but her life was actually unraveling. According to Crystal, Brenda decided to get rid of Kendra Hatcher at this point. In Crystal's testimony, she detailed how Brenda devised a plan to kill Kendra, enlisting her support. Brenda and Crystal started formulating a plan to kill Kendra, meeting several times and developing multiple plans. Initially, they planned to inject Kendra with illegal substances or sedatives and then dispose of her body. However, to avoid suspicion, Brenda needed a reliable enforcer and began looking for one. They drove around rough neighborhoods, asking people if they could help, which led them to Christopher Love, who agreed to help and participated in deciding the method of the crime. The three of them decided that shooting Kendra would be the quickest way to kill her. Crystal cooperated with authorities, revealing September 2nd wasn't a random choice. Brenda knew Kendra and Ricardo were going to Mexico, so they decided to kill Kendra before their trip. They wanted it to look like a botched robbery. Brenda and Crystal tracked Kendra's movements for days, noting her activities minute by minute. They traced her route home and entered the apartment complex's parking garage on September 1st, 2015, to set up the crime. Brenda and Crystal made a final check on the day of the crime. They picked up the Jeep and Christopher, dropping Brenda at the library to establish an alibi. Crystal and Christopher waited near Kendra's apartment, then followed her, losing her in traffic. They waited at her house, and when she arrived, Christopher shot her. Crystal claimed she didn't see it but heard the shot. She drove Christopher home, picked up her son, and returned the Jeep to Jose. Brenda's plan had finally come to fruition. She had eliminated her rival, and all she had to do was wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda was thrilled to have committed the perfect crime. However, Crystal's subsequent confession and testimony against Brenda left no doubt about her guilt, and a warrant for her arrest was promptly issued. When the police arrived with the warrant, Brenda was no longer at home, having fled to Mexico using her dual citizenship. Brenda's involvement in a contract killing came to light after she fled, and on April 6, 2016, she was placed on the FBI's wanted list. With a $100,000 reward offered for information about her, she became the 9th woman to ever be listed among the most wanted fugitives, and the only woman on the list at the time. However, her freedom was short-lived, as she was apprehended just 2 days later in Torreon, Coahuila, by Mexican authorities, who extradited her to the United States on October 6, but only on the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Brenda was charged with capital murder in the U.S. At her 2017 Texas trial, relatives of Kendra and Ricardo spoke out. Witnesses testified, confirming Brenda's intentions and obsession with her ex. Her cousin Moses revealed Brenda's depression and her attempt to hire him to hurt Kendra. Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo, said friend Jennifer Escobar. Brenda read Ricardo's emails, tracked his movements, and had his house key and bank access. She asked Jennifer to kill or disable Kendra Hatcher, offering $2,000, a car, and drugs. Jennifer refused after consulting her parents. In court, multiple people who knew Brenda testified about her obsession, and it was established that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She viewed Kendra as an obstacle to getting what she wanted, specifically reuniting with Ricky. In the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda's obsession grew increasingly intense, as corroborated by evidence presented in court. This evidence included an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500, which Brenda later gave to Crystal as payment for her role, as well as a $600 cash payment received by Christopher Love. Furthermore, cell phone records revealed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime, with over 99 calls exchanged between Brenda and Crystal between August 22nd and September 4th, demonstrating their frequent communication to discuss the plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. Despite an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant, the jury quickly found her guilty of Kendra Hatcher's murder. Delgado was sentenced to life without parole. Crystal Cortez, who cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, received a 35-year prison sentence with parole eligibility. The Hatcher family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom following the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family, who knew Brenda as a loving daughter and woman with strong Christian values, refused to believe she was involved until the end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Borden family. Michael and Catherine met in school, bonding over homework and walks. They became inseparable friends, sharing secrets and learning from each other. Their friendship blossomed into romance, and Michael eventually asked Catherine on a date, declaring his love. They got married in a beautiful ceremony, vowing to love each other through life's ups and downs. After 10 years, the Borden family moved to Lititz, Pennsylvania, a peaceful town founded by the Moravian Church in 1756. The town's faithful residents, including Amish families, sought refuge from modern chaos, living simply and avoiding modern tech. The devout Bordens chose Lititz for its ideal setting to raise children, surrounded by calm and serenity. Michael was an active member of the local church community, where he taught Sunday school lessons. His wife Catherine managed the household and supported him in his community work. While he focused on spiritual growth, Michael also worked as a manager at a printing company to provide for their everyday needs. Over time, they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. Large families like theirs were common in Lititz, where parents hoped to protect their children from the outside world's hardships and dangers. Regular church attendance, youth groups, and homeschooling were a big part of family life. Interactions between families were mostly limited to religious gatherings and celebrations. Michael and his wife built a peaceful home life, raising their kids in faith and discipline. When their eldest sons left for university, the 3 younger kids continued homeschooling, pleasing their parents. Neighbors and friends praised the kind, responsive, and interesting kids: Kara, Caitlin, and Daniel. Kara, the eldest daughter, challenged traditional values in her teens. Despite her dad's disapproval, she joined the soccer team, snuck out to discos, and did forbidden things. Her dad was troubled, and talks often ended in arguments and her running away. Kara sought romantic relationships and showed interest in boys. In 2005, David, 18, and Kara, 14, connected at a homeschooling support group. They formed a close bond, hiding it from their parents, and used social media to exchange messages, pouring their hearts out. They crafted coded messages to keep their communication private. Kara and David's letter exchange wasn't enough, so they secretly met in person. At first, they took innocent walks, but their friendship blossomed into romance. They snuck out to discos, spending nights together. David, older, had experienced first love, while Kara's inexperience made her feelings overwhelming. Her joy was radiant, but her obedience to her parents was feigned. driven by fear of discovery. But sooner or later, every secret is exposed. One day, Kara couldn't keep her secret hidden anymore and confided in her sister. She showed her a photo of David, told her about how they met and how they were deeply in love and willing to overcome all obstacles to be together. They were even planning to run away to be together. However, Kara's sister was worried about her and told their mother about their planned elopement, which ultimately revealed the secret of the young lovers. One early morning, Kara snuck back home, feeling elated after her date with David. But her mother was waiting in her room, clearly aware of her secret. At breakfast, Kara's parents forbade her from seeing David, deeming him unsuitable due to their concerns about violence and drugs. Angry and disappointed, Kara's father grounded her. That night, Kara spent her free time at David's house. At 5:30 a.m., David drove Kara back to her neighborhood and dropped her off near her house. They agreed that once Kara was safely back in her room, she would send him a text message to let him know she was okay. However, the message never came. David tried calling her home phone several times and sent her a few messages on social media, but he didn't hear back from her. An hour later, Kara finally got in touch with him, explaining that she had gotten caught by her parents and asked him to come over so they could talk to him. David arrived on time, but Kara's parents were fiercely opposed. Her dad forbade David from seeing Kara, deeming her too young for a relationship. David's declarations of love fell flat, with her dad threatening to call the police if he saw them together again. The emotional confrontation ended with Kara grounded and David leaving, feeling rejected and heartbroken for the first time. The lovers' separation was agonizing. They devised a plan to deceive everyone by pretending to break up while secretly continuing their affair. In public, they convincingly played the part of former lovers, not even greeting each other. Kara's parents were convinced they'd protected her from a youthful mistake. However, David missed Kara terribly, often reading Shakespeare and imagining openly serenading her like Romeo. David Ludwig took drastic measures by calling Kara's home to request a meeting with her father, Michael. On November 13, 2015, the young man arrived at the Borden residence, determined to discuss their plans to get married. Ludwig confessed his love for Kara and their intentions to Michael, but he received a dismissive response, saying it would never happen. Prepared for this reaction, Ludwig, fueled by anger, pulled out a handgun and shot Michael in the back as he walked towards the front door. Next, he targeted Kara's mother, Catherine, shooting her while she sat in a chair. Ludwig then searched the house for Kara, calling out her name, but she was nowhere to be found. He got into his car, started the engine, and began to drive away. That's when he spotted Kara running down the road towards him. She got into the car, expressing her desire to escape and start a new life with David. They fled the city in David's red car, leaving the chaos behind. Kara Borden was missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Borden, were found dead. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage, which led them to track the teenagers. The footage also showed that Kara didn't resist and had willingly gone with David Ludwig. As a result, the charges against Ludwig for abducting Kara were dropped. Alerts were issued to police across the East, including in Pennsylvania and Indiana, as the couple was spotted heading west in a red Volkswagen Jetta. On Monday morning, authorities received a tip about a vehicle matching the description parked near a truck stop outside Fort Wayne. Police rushed to the area, but the car was already gone. State police were alerted, and they spotted the car around noon on Interstate 70 in Belleville. David Ludwig got onto the interstate, leading police on a high-speed chase at 90 to 95 miles per hour on a two-lane highway. According to State Trooper David Couch, who was involved in the pursuit, Ludwig drove extremely recklessly and dangerously, causing multiple accidents, much like in an action movie. The district attorney announced that, despite the initial kidnapping charge being dropped, they would still face charges for the brutal murder of Michael and Catherine Borden. David Ludwig and Kara Beth Borden went on the run following the tragic incident, evading authorities for approximately 28 hours before being apprehended in Indiana. While Kara Beth was not charged with any crime, David Ludwig was detained without bail, facing charges of murder and abduction. In the aftermath, Kara was taken in by relatives and church members for care. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005, following a high-speed chase that ended with his vehicle crashing into a tree. He was charged with the murder of the Bordens, a crime allegedly committed after a prolonged dispute. Ludwig confessed to 2 counts of intentional harm, stating that he had deliberately intended to shoot the Bordens if they got in his way, and that he did so. During a search of his vehicle after his arrest, no weapons were found. However, when the police searched his home, they discovered an arsenal of 54 firearms, which belonged to his father, a hunter who had taught Ludwig how to handle weapons. The police also found an 18-minute video on a laptop in his home, which showed Ludwig discussing plans to invade another family's home, armed with weapons. The plan was abandoned due to the presence of too many cars. Although the police declared Kara Borden a victim in the case, Ludwig claimed that surveillance footage from various stores along their route would prove that she was not abducted. He did not resist extradition to Pennsylvania, and a judge ordered him held without bail. Ludwig was not represented by an attorney during the charge presentation, and a preliminary hearing was set for November 23rd. The trial of Ludwig, who was responsible for the deaths of 2 adults in front of their children, was brief, as detailed in court documents. Caitlin, Kara's 13-year-old sister, told investigators that her parents were killed after arguing with David Ludwig for about an hour. According to Caitlin, Ludwig shot her father, and she then ran to the bathroom where she heard a second shot, which likely killed her mother. Afterwards, Ludwig ran through the house, calling out to Kara. In June 2006, David Ludwig agreed to a plea deal with District Attorney Donald R. Totoro, who had originally sought the death penalty. As a result, Ludwig pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, among other charges, and was immediately sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences of 9.5 to 19 years. He was also ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. Since 2006, Kara Borden has been under guardianship, represented by legal counsel. In November 2005, it was reported that the charge of abduction against David G. Ludwig was dropped. The court concluded that Kara had voluntarily left with Ludwig, as supported by written statements. Ludwig's lawyer claimed that Kara had accompanied David voluntarily during their journey through 3 states, and surveillance footage showed that she had multiple opportunities to escape. Kara herself admitted that she had run after Ludwig as he left her house. Kara Beth Borden was identified as a victim in this tragic situation, and as a result, the Lancaster County District Attorney did not file criminal charges against her. This decision was influenced by her actions during the investigation and the digital evidence collected from emails, blogs, and texts exchanged with Ludwig. A memorial service was held at Lancaster Bible College, where Kara Beth, surrounded by her siblings, mourned the loss of her parents. As a sign of respect and remembrance, the neighborhood adorned their mailboxes with white ribbons. This tragedy left 5 children without the guidance and love of their parents. David Ludwig was transferred to Indiana's State Correctional Institution at Pine Grove to serve his life sentence for murdering his girlfriend's parents. He was chosen for the prison's youthful offender program, designed for inmates 15 to 20, which focuses on teaching self-responsibility, discipline, and respect for others. David Ludwig, now 37, is serving 2 life sentences for fatally shooting Michael and Catherine Borden in 2005 after they barred him from seeing their 14-year-old daughter. He cited the 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling against life imprisonment for minors, but the PA Supreme Court denied his petition, agreeing with a lower court that he's not entitled to same consideration since he was 18 at the time. David Ludwig will spend life in prison. The community struggled to understand how well-raised kids committed evil. Despite Christian homeschooling, tragedy struck, leaving questions if parents overlooked or failed to convey values. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kelly Clayton. Kelly Clayton, also known as Kelly Stage Clayton, resides in Cotton, New York. Kelly Clayton had a promising life ahead of her. In high school, she was an exemplary student, excelling academically and serving as a role model for her peers. Her academic achievements were impressive, and she passed exams with ease. Despite her academic focus, Kelly's appearance was often described as model-like, and she could have pursued a career in modeling if she had chosen to do so. Following high school, Kelly enrolled in a teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher, which brought immense pride to her parents. However, after a few years, Kelly suddenly lost interest in her studies. It is unclear what triggered this change, but she eventually withdrew from the university and informed her parents that she no longer wanted to pursue a teaching career. Kelly felt that she was too young to be confined to a life of grading notebooks and managing classrooms. Instead, she expressed a desire to travel and experience life to the fullest. Her parents were disappointed and upset by her decision, leading to a 6-month estrangement from their daughter. Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she met Tom Clayton at a party hosted by mutual friends. Tom was immediately smitten with Kelly and began showering her with attention. His athletic physique and attractive appearance made him a standout, which wasn't surprising given his successful hockey career. As a semi-professional player for the Jackal team, Tom was known for his strength and aggression on the ice. However, he realized his hockey career would eventually end due to physical limitations. Tom would have to retire and enjoy the game from the sidelines, either by attending live matches or watching his favorite team on television. They continued with their lives, starting by returning to New York to get married. They then moved to North Carolina and eventually settled in the small town of Cato, which had only a few thousand residents. Tom started a franchise that specialized in rebuilding houses damaged by fires or disasters. He also worked for a friend's company in a related field. Kelly, on the other hand, had dropped out of university and was working as a waitress. Although she changed jobs, she continued to work even after having 2 children. Tom's income was sufficient for the family, and Kelly could have quit her job to care for their daughters, but she chose to continue working to earn extra money. She used this extra income to buy toys and pamper her children. On September 28, 2015, Tom went to play poker with his friends, the Millers, as he usually did. He preferred to attend these gatherings alone, as playing for money required a certain level of skill and experience. Additionally, someone had to stay home with the children, and bringing the whole family would have turned the evening into a noisy and chaotic affair, detracting from the enjoyment of the game. That evening, Tom was on a losing streak, but instead of giving up, he tried to win back his losses. He suggested that anyone who wanted to stay and play until morning was welcome to do so, but no one took him up on the offer, and he ended up going home. At home, a horrific scene unfolded before Tom's eyes. His wife lay in a pool of her own blood, severely beaten and, at first glance, appeared lifeless. Panicked, Tom frantically searched the rooms for his children. Fortunately, they were unharmed but terrified. He quickly scooped up his daughters and rushed to his neighbor Derek's house, desperate to shield them from the gruesome sight of their mother's battered body. From Derek's house, Tom called the police, struggling to process the chaos. The officer who arrived at the scene found Tom kneeling beside his wife's body, attempting to administer CPR. However, the emergency medical technicians soon intervened and pulled Tom away, revealing the devastating truth: Kelly had been deceased for an extended period, and nothing could be done to revive her. The house was in disarray, with blood covering both floors. The bedroom showed signs of an intense struggle between Kelly and her killer, who carried out the brutal act despite the presence of children in the house. It appeared Kelly had been pushed down the stairs, as evidenced by the broken banister, and brutally beaten with a blunt object until the killer was certain she was dead. No signs of knife or gunshot wounds were found. The officer filming the crime scene observed that Tom seemed lost and in shock. He wandered aimlessly, briefly entering the room before exiting, and was unable to provide the officer with basic information, such as the location of the children's room or the emergency exit. However, when asked about his whereabouts during the murder, Tom calmly stated he had spent the evening at a friend's house playing poker. The officer, failing to obtain clear information from Tom, proceeded to question the neighbor and the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, described the perpetrator as a robber. According to Charlie, she and her sister were drifting off to sleep when they heard their mother scream loudly from the next room. Their mother yelled, "Charlie, run away from here," and then the whole house shook violently. They cautiously left their room and saw the perpetrator leaning over their mother, beating her with what looked like a hammer. They ran back into the nursery, blocked the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. Fortunately, the perpetrator wasn't looking for them, as the nightstand wouldn't have been enough to stop him. When asked to describe the perpetrator, Charlie said he was big, like a bear. He wore blue jeans, a black shirt, and a mask similar to the one her father wears when hunting. Charlie also noted that the perpetrator's eyes looked like her father's, but she didn't remember anything else, as she only caught a brief glimpse before getting scared and running away. Police officers investigating the house couldn't find evidence to support her claim that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at the front or back doors, but the garage gate was open, which could have been an entry point. However, nothing was stolen from the house, including jewelry and cash, and the cabinets were all closed. This was unusual, as burglars typically search every area. Officers quickly suspected that Tom, was involved in the murder. They believed he was pretending to be a grieving husband and had actually killed his wife to collect insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, Tom could potentially receive up to $1 million. The police just needed to gather evidence to solve the case, especially since the daughter mentioned that the perpetrator's mask and eyes resembled her father's. However, the police couldn't find the hunting mask in the house. After discovering Tom's whereabouts on the night in question, the police interviewed the other poker players. One of Tom's friends was incredulous. "You think Tom is the killer? That's unbelievable. His wife was just murdered, and instead of finding the real culprit, you're focusing on him." Another friend, less emotional, chimed in, "Tom couldn't have done it. He worked 2 jobs non-stop because he loved Kelly and their kids. It's just not possible. Besides, he was with us the entire night, playing poker. Even when everyone else was tired, he wanted to keep playing." Laura, an acquaintance of Tom's, shared her concerns during a break in the game. She recalled that Tom had asked to borrow her phone, claiming he had left his in the car, which was only 10 meters away. Laura found this odd but lent him her phone anyway. Tom stepped outside to make the call, but when Laura checked her phone's call history later, there was no record of the call, suggesting that Tom had deleted it. Laura discussed this incident with her husband, who had been sitting next to Tom at the poker table. He noticed that Tom wasn't paying attention to the game, instead keeping his head down, focusing on something on the table. It turned out that Tom had his phone with him the whole time, which raised more questions. Why did Tom borrow Laura's phone if he had his own? Who was he trying to call, and why couldn't he use his own phone? After Laura's testimony, the police re-questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and she reiterated that the robber resembled her father. The next testimony came from the niece of Kelly. She explained that she hadn't told her Aunt Kelly about Tom's true nature because she didn't want to upset Kelly. Aunt Kelly adored Tom. The niece felt her truth wasn't needed, implying that it wouldn't change anything. The niece saw Tom as a person with 2 sides. On the surface, he appeared caring and attentive, often showering Aunt Kelly with attention and gifts, and even helping with childcare, which is more than many fathers do. However, his behavior at work revealed a completely different personality. Recognizing her niece's concerns about being young and alone, Aunt Kelly had set up a job for her with Tom the previous summer. During her employment, the niece handled tasks such as correspondence, registration, and managing documents. At first, her interactions with Tom were strictly professional, mainly because she didn't know him well before working for him. One day, Tom got drunk and came to the office, revealing to the niece that his family life was a facade. He confessed to loving his daughters, but not his wife, Aunt Kelly. He had been unfaithful, having multiple affairs during their marriage, and considered leaving her but stayed due to financial concerns. It was later also confirmed by female participants of a poker game that Tom was indeed unfaithful, having relationships with 2 women present at the game. Additionally, Kelly's 16-year-old niece shared information about Michael Beard, another employee of Tom's firm. Michael was doing repair work on houses after a fire, but there were frequent reports of items going missing from the houses where he worked. Tom initially doubted his customers when they accused Michael Beard of theft during fire restoration jobs. However, as the complaints continued, it became clear that Michael was indeed stealing from clients. Additionally, there were allegations of Michael showing up to work intoxicated. When Tom finally confronted Michael about his behavior, he was understandably upset and disappointed. Despite having every right to be angry, Tom took a surprisingly compassionate approach. Instead of simply firing Michael and cutting ties, Tom actively reached out to other companies and recommended Michael for a job. When none of those opportunities panned out, Tom took it a step further and offered Michael work around his own house, doing odd jobs like cutting the grass, watering plants, and making minor repairs. This decision showed that Tom was willing to give Michael a second chance, even if it meant finding alternative employment for his former employee. The detective brought Michael Beard in for questioning. Michael claimed he only stole because he and his family were in dire need of money. He expressed his gratitude towards Tom, his former employer, who had always defended him. Michael also praised Tom's wife, who had shown kindness by feeding him and giving his children old clothes. However, the investigation took a turn when Michael's wife, Holly, was interrogated. She revealed that Tom had offered Michael a job, which Michael had not mentioned earlier, and promised to pay him $10,000 for it. This new information raised suspicions about Michael's alibi. He was called back to the station and hooked up to a lie detector. The test results indicated that Michael was lying, and he eventually cracked under pressure and began to confess. The investigation was sparked by the death of Kelly, which had shaken Michael. He had even attended church to pray for her soul, showing that he was genuinely distraught by her passing. Despite initial doubts about his involvement, the police had released him after the first round of questioning. However, Holly's testimony changed everything. Tom promised Michael $10,000 to kill his wife, Kelly, and make it look like an accident. The plan was for Michael to sneak into the house while Tom was playing poker, strangle Kelly, and then start a fire to cover up the crime. The house was insured for a large sum of money. Michael found 2 cans of gasoline waiting for him in the garage, which he would use to set the fire. He quietly entered the house while everyone was asleep. He crept upstairs to Kelly's bedroom, but she was either awake or woken by the sound of the door. She saw Michael and began screaming. Kelly's screaming startled Michael, and he tried to strangle her. However, Kelly was stronger than she appeared and fought back. A fierce struggle ensued, moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Michael was surprised by Kelly's strength, which made the fight much more intense than he had anticipated. Michael was in a state of shock and panic, flailing his arms wildly and grabbing at Kelly's clothes, unable to focus on the fight. In contrast, Kelly was fighting for her life, accurately aiming her blows at Michael's face. If the police had arrived at Michael's location sooner, they would have seen evidence of the beating he had taken. After a prolonged struggle, Michael slammed Kelly's head into the wall with great force, knocking her to the ground. She was unable to get up for some time. Michael then produced a hammer and continued to strike Kelly's head until she showed no signs of life. Consumed by rage and panic, Michael fled the house, forgetting that Tom had instructed him not only to kill Kelly but also to set fire to the house to conceal the crime. Mark Blandford, Michael's accomplice, was just the driver. Knowing Michael from working together and staying with him, Mark had not been surprised when Michael, known for petty theft, had asked him to drive during a break-in. Mark had mentioned that he had initially wanted to decline Michael's request, but that the offer of $500 had been tempting. After some deliberation, Michael had convinced him to participate. Michael's plan had been to rob a businessman, and he had needed Mark's assistance to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Michael had also promised to help with the car. Mark had eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he could park the car at a safe distance from the house. Michael had accepted this condition. That evening, Mark had waited for Michael in the car in a dark alley, and Michael had come back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling him to move as fast as possible. Michael hadn't had any bag or sack on him, which hadn't looked much like a robbery. Mark hadn't asked him any questions along the way, simply because he hadn't wanted to know anything. He had just wanted his $500, which he hadn't ended up getting. On the way out, Michael had asked Mark to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of there. Mark had stopped there, and Michael had hastily stripped off his outer garments and thrown them off the bridge. Mark had offered to show the place if needed. Indeed, police officers who had arrived on the scene at Mark's behest had found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Michael had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. Tom denied ordering the massacre of his wife, claiming Michael acted alone. According to Tom, Michael knew Tom had money and was motivated by resentment over losing his job. Tom suggested Michael robbed his house, unaware Kelly was home, resulting in her death. However, Laura, a woman who played poker with Tom, revealed that Tom used her cell phone to make a call. The detective obtained the call records, confirming suspicions. The records showed Tom called Michael on the night of September 28th to 29th. Michael was tried first and maintained he was hired to set fire to the house for insurance purposes. He claimed he didn't kill Kelly and the blood on his clothes came from touching her dead body. He had disposed of his belongings to avoid suspicion of being at the Claytons' house that night. His testimony seemed convincing. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on all counts against Michael Beard, who now faced life imprisonment. In contrast, Tom's lawyers managed to gather records of conversations and correspondence between Tom and Michael, but none of these clearly mentioned their nefarious plan. Furthermore, the prosecution's attempts to obtain billing transcripts of Tom's movements yielded no concrete evidence. All the evidence against Tom was circumstantial. However, one key detail caught the attention of investigators. The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. Moreover, on the day of the incident, Tom had arrived at the office in his personal Toyota but then switched to the company's pickup truck, which was later driven to Michael's house and left there. The truck was returned to the office the day after the tragedy. This suggested that Tom had, in fact, provided Michael with the car that he and Mark used to commit the crime. It was a crucial piece of evidence that the jury testified to during the trial. The 6-day trial concluded with the jury finding Tom guilty of hiring Michael to commit the heinous crime. Michael subsequently appealed, using the testimony of young Charlie, who claimed that the eyes behind the mask belonged to her father. However, the court dismissed the appeal due to the matching description of the clothing found under the bridge. Consequently, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard were sentenced to life in prison. Mark received a 4-year prison sentence for manslaughter. The custody of Tom and Kelly's children was awarded to Kelly's sister, Kim. With time, Charlie has learned to cope with the tragedy. Although she occasionally remembers her mother, she refuses to discuss her father, whom she will never want to see again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship. He considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoe box, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in a car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardial Hill Trail. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bubeck indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna Marie Schneller was an 18-year-old with a vibrant personality who loved Mexican food, music, dancing, and roller coasters. She was an exceptional student, and ranking as the top student at Everest High School in Washington, according to her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller. Brianna had a promising future ahead, with a trip to Tennessee planned for the summer and a notable achievement as the only student in Wisconsin to qualify for a national competition in professional and technical fields. Brianna's passion was to pursue a career in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food service industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Those who knew her, including friends, colleagues, and customers, described her as kind and responsive. Brianna's life was on the verge of two major events: her graduation and her wedding to her 22-year-old fiancé, Sebastian Ramirez. Brianna's parents initially disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and concerns that she was growing up too quickly. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they began to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious plans for their future together. They eventually moved in together, sharing an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wow with Sebastian's 19-year-old younger brother, Hugo. To outsiders, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, burning the envy of many for their close friendship. Sebastian and Hugo supported Brianna's interests and also worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. It's likely that this is where Sebastian and Brianna first met. Despite their seemingly perfect life, tragedy struck on May 2, 2009. The day began like any other, with Sebastian waking up early and trying not to disturb Brianna, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. It was a day off from school, and she had no reason to wake up early. Brianna woke up while her boyfriend was in the shower. They exchanged affectionate greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse Hugo, who had returned home early that morning after a late-night party. Hugo was clearly hungover. After Sebastian left for work, which was just a short walk away, his younger brother followed suit. Brianna was left alone in the apartment. Later, Hugo was feeling unwell. His hangover was severe, and he was struggling to concentrate. He decided to take an early lunch break and headed home to rest. When he arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he entered his brother's room, he noticed that it was in disarray. Brianna was lying on the floor, unresponsive. Hugo rushed to her side and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. At first, he didn't notice the blood. Hugo discovered a horrific scene when he removed a towel covering a woman's face. Her severe injuries had left Hugo almost unrecognizable, and he was utterly shocked and overcome with grief at the sight of her. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act quickly and ran to his neighbor's apartment on the floor below for help. The neighbor, a woman, called emergency services at 1:30 p.m., who was too distraught to speak clearly. The emergency operator received the call and was told that she was the girlfriend of Sebastian. She was lying on the floor, severely injured with cuts all over her body and a badly disfigured face. The operator was informed that she showed no signs of life. Police and paramedics rushed to the apartment building after receiving a call. When they arrived, they found a crowded parking lot, but one person stood out, Hugo Ramirez. He approached the officers and led them to the apartment where the incident occurred. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Brianna's body was severely injured, with deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. Hugo was visibly shaken and could barely speak as he led officers to the apartment. He simply pointed to Brianna's body, and the officers took note of the scene. The officers asked Hugo to leave the room so that forensic specialists could begin their examination. The specialists observed that the blood on the floor had already started to dry, suggesting that Brianna's body had been there for some time. It was clear that she had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the attacker had overpowered her, leaving behind a crime scene with a significant amount of evidence. The forensic team found several key pieces of evidence, including a bloody iron on the floor, which appeared to have been used to strike Brianna's face. The iron was broken, with pieces scattered nearby. 2 knives were found in the bathroom sink, one of which was missing its sharp tip. Blood was also found on the soap, suggesting that the attacker had washed their hands after the crime. However, the most notable piece of evidence was a bloodied shoe print on the carpet, which drew the investigators' attention. The investigation of the house uncovered many new details. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim may have known her attacker or that the perpetrator had a way to enter the apartment without breaking in. Additionally, a large sum of money was found scattered throughout the apartment, consisting of bills ranging from $1 to $20. According to Hugo, this money was comprised of tips they had accumulated at work, which were carelessly left lying around. At first glance, it appeared that nothing was missing from the apartment, indicating that the attack was not motivated by robbery. This theory was further supported by the discovery of a broken knife tip in the victim's body. The fact that the knife broke during the attack indicates that the perpetrator applied considerable force. It's crucial to grasp what may have motivated someone to hold such intense feelings of anger and aggression against she. Uncovering the cause of this brutal and unprecedented attack is crucial in shedding light on the matter. Craig and Laura Schneller anxiously waited at the police station, having heard that something terrible had happened at their daughter's home. Unfortunately, they had been unable to contact Brianna, and their hearts were heavy with worry. The officers had to tell the parents Brianna that their worst fears had come true. The news was devastating. Their daughter, Brianna, had passed away. The loss of a child is one of the greatest sorrows a parent can experience, and for the Schnellers, it was a life-altering moment. To confirm the identity, the authorities showed them photographs of Brianna, but only those that clearly showed her face, as some of the other images were too graphic. After confirming the tragic news, the Schnellers were in shock. With the help of a psychologist, they were able to compose themselves and answer questions from the police. They were eager to assist in the investigation and help catch the person responsible. The Schnellers provided as much information as they could about their daughter's life, but they insisted that she had no known enemies. They also revealed that Brianna's mother had been the last person she had spoken to that morning. Her mother, Craig, took Brianna's car to the repair shop and messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to let her know. Brianna replied to the message. The investigation shows that the tragedy occurred at a point in time that was after they sent messages to each other and before Hugo's arrival. As part of their inquiry, detectives first interviewed the Ramirez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, questioning them separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, stated that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke up his brother, Hugo. Around 10:15 a.m. Sebastian claimed he was already at the restaurant when he received a phone call informing him about the incident. Hugo's account corroborated Sebastian's, saying he left the house around 10:15 a.m., shortly after his brother. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. due to feeling unwell and wanting to rest. When Hugo found Brianna's body, his reported illness and fatigue vanished almost instantly. The events that followed were a daze. He was so shocked that he couldn't think clearly about how to respond. His mind went blank, and his hands shook uncontrollably, prompting him to seek help from a neighbor. The Ramirez brothers' accounts were believable, and their distress seemed authentic. Nevertheless, the police had seen convincing performances before, so they needed concrete evidence to confirm their innocence. It was possible that one of the brothers was involved in the crime, and the other was covering for him. To investigate this, detectives asked about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about whether he had any issues with Brianna or if they had argued, but he denied it. Hugo also explained that while he found her attractive and charming, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never jeopardize his happiness. Brianna was like a sister to Hugo. And after hours of questioning, neither Hugo nor Sebastian raised any suspicions. The police took DNA samples from the brothers and allowed them to return home. To verify the brothers' alibis, detectives spoke with employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. The brothers' accounts checked out, and the possibility of a domestic-related crime was ruled out. The investigation continued, and the question remained, who could have committed such a heinous crime against an innocent young woman? Was there a predator lurking in the city who had been watching Brianna and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The police considered this possibility as they analyzed the evidence. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. Brianna was first hit on the head with a blunt object, likely an iron, which caused a severe injury. The perpetrator then cut her throat and inflicted multiple stab wounds to her body. The attack was extremely violent, with so many wounds that even experts couldn't count them all. At least 2 of the injuries were fatal. DNA from an unknown source was found under Brianna's fingernails, indicating that she struggled and resisted her attacker. Initial reports that nothing was missing from Brianna's home were later found to be incorrect. Brianna's phone had actually been taken, and Sebastian was the one who discovered its loss and informed the detectives. This new information became a crucial lead in the investigation. The police learned from the phone provider that the phone was still active and obtained its location. Surprisingly, the phone was found to be nearby, specifically on the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. This revelation added complexity to the case, given the brothers' solid alibi and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the missing phone. The detectives rushed to the location and found that the phone's coordinates led them to the parking lot of a shopping center that housed the restaurant. A search of the area revealed that the phone was likely in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found in a container. Inside the bag were the victim's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves had a blood stain. The bag and its contents were sent to the lab for further analysis, which could potentially yield fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. After seeing a photo of the bag's contents, Sebastian identified his girlfriend's underwear. The police then questioned the restaurant staff multiple times. On May 5th, they asked everyone to provide a DNA sample and checked for any scratches or injuries. They also carefully reviewed all the surveillance footage, both inside and outside the building and nearby businesses. The police had a challenging task to figure out who had thrown away the bag. A kitchen worker initially caught the investigators' attention because he arrived late to work after Brianna had already been found lifeless. However, he had a solid alibi. He had been pulled over for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Reviewing the security footage was crucial to the investigation, which led them to another suspect, Raul Ponce Rocha, the 24-year-old kitchen manager. On the day of the crime, Raul left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned 35 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., without it. When questioned, Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant, who lived in the same building as Brianna and her colleagues. Raul claimed the trip took about 20 minutes, but there was a 15-minute gap in his timeline that he refused to explain. Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they drove straight to work without stopping. Nevertheless, the detectives remained skeptical about the unaccounted 15 minutes and Raul's suspicious behavior. Raul Ponce Rocha, the manager of El Tequila Salsa, had raised suspicions due to the cuts on his hands, which he claimed were from working with knives. However, there was not enough evidence to detain him at that point. Further investigation revealed that on May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee had exited the back door of the restaurant, and at the same time, only one person had approached the trash bins. This led to the quick identification of the suspect, who was surprisingly Raul Ponce Rocha, not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez as initially suspected. A search warrant was obtained for Raul's home, and the search uncovered some peculiar items. Under his mattress, investigators found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove similar to the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag, and a strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. All the evidence pointed to Brianna. It was only a matter of time before the test results confirmed the match. Raul was eventually arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned when he learned that a suspect had been identified in the brutal crime. He had trouble believing that his co-worker, Raul Ponce Rocha, could be capable of such a heinous act. What motivated Raul to commit this crime, especially since he barely knew Brianna? Sebastian's impression of Raul was that he was a friendly and harmless person. The mystery began to unravel in 2011 when Raul stood trial. Despite a lengthy investigation, Raul consistently denied any involvement in the crime and never admitted guilt. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence that contradicted his claims. Raul's DNA was found on several key pieces of evidence, including the iron, knives, a plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. A shoe print at the crime scene also matched Raul's shoes. The evidence pieced together the events of May 2, 2009. On his way to work that day, Raul passed by Brianna's house, a place that had long fascinated him. Assuming she was out, since her car was not in the driveway, he took advantage of the opportunity to break into her apartment and take what he wanted. Raul had a disturbing habit of collecting women's underwear, with evidence found hidden under his mattress. On the day of the incident, Raul left work, supposedly to pick up his friend Luciano, but instead entered Brianna's apartment without warning. He easily gained entry, suggesting he may have had a key, and went directly to Brianna's room, where he began rummaging through her belongings. When Brianna confronted him, Raul was likely caught off guard and feared being recognized. Panicked, he grabbed the nearest object, an iron, and used it to strike her. He then escalated the violence by slashing her throat with a knife and inflicting multiple other injuries. The investigation found that the killer appeared to take pleasure in the brutal act, as evidenced by the numerous and excessive wounds inflicted on the victim. The attacker also used multiple knives during the assault. After committing the crime, Raul attempted to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, which was likely stained with blood. He then calmly returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, and drove Luciano to the restaurant as planned. Raul took advantage of the lunch break to dispose of the evidence bag in a trash bin, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. Before the trial, Raul admitted to meeting with Brianna but claimed he didn't kill her. However, he suspected someone else might have and named a former restaurant employee. Raul stated that he saw this acquaintance, Sergio, at Brianna's house on the day she died. This confirmed that Raul had indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when Raul left, Sergio stayed behind and had an argument with Brianna. Raul's statement raised more questions and led to further investigations. The authorities verified the information and managed to contact Sergio, who was abroad at the time. Sergio appeared at the trial and testified that he was not involved in Brianna's death. He proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime, as he had left weeks earlier to care for his ill father in Mexico. It became clear that Raul had hoped to falsely accuse Sergio and create doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed, and Raul's actions showed that he had no qualms about accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime, and he felt no remorse for his actions. The trial of Raul Ponce Rocha drew a large crowd, including Brianna's family members and her friends Sebastian and Hugo. The young men struggled to keep their emotions in check, prompting officers to intervene multiple times to restore calm. In the end, Raul was found guilty of murdering Brianna Schneller and burglary, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at a correctional facility in Wisconsin. After the verdict, Brianna's father expressed his gratitude that justice had been served. He shared that he still keeps a Father's Day card Brianna gave him and cherishes every memory of her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ilana Frick. Ilana Christina Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, to George and Anna, who had immigrated to Canada from Croatia in the early 1970s. She was the younger of two daughters, with an older sister named Caroline, with whom she was extremely close. Ilana's birth was considered a miracle by her parents. Her mother, Anna, had faced serious health complications after her first pregnancy, and doctors had told them that Anna would likely never conceive again. Anna and George made a significant effort to ensure their daughter's well-being and meet their needs, in spite of the difficulties they faced. They both worked at a car factory, striving to give Ilana and Caroline a good education and a comfortable life. Growing up, Ilana was a diligent and passionate student. She spent most of her free time reading, also found time to attend dance classes, practice gymnastics, and compete in track and field events. During her summer breaks, Ilana chose to work to help support her family, often working in cornfields and learning to manage her finances wisely. As she progressed through school, Ilana excelled in math and science, and by the time she reached high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. Ilana graduated at the top of her high school class and was accepted into a prestigious medical university. Around the same time, she started dating Matthew Ryan, a classmate from high school who was also studying in the same department. They maintained a long-distance relationship after graduation, with Ilana moving to Ottawa to pursue a residency program at the university. Matthew, on the other hand, chose to work at a local hospital and did not pursue further education. Despite the distance, Ilana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002. They had even made plans to get married, but ultimately decided to remain friends. By then, Ilana was interning at a top clinic and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had not advanced. In February 2003, during a night shift at the hospital, Ilana met Mohammed Shamji, a new colleague. She was immediately drawn to him. Mohammed, who was just a year older than Ilana, was a resident in the neurosurgery department and came from a family of prominent doctors. Mohammed Shamji was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, into a family of medical professionals. His father, Farid Shamji, was a well-known surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a talented psychiatrist. Mohammed's older brother, Ali, also pursued a career in medicine, becoming a medical biophysicist. Both brothers attended Yale University, and later, Mohammed returned to Canada to earn his doctoral degree from the University of Western Ontario. Additionally, Mohammed had taken an interest in a blonde woman, but at first, he did not make any attempts to approach her. Ilana was immediately drawn to Mohammed, a tall, dark-skinned man, and sought to capture his attention. He eventually asked for her number and initiated contact, marking the beginning of their romance. Initially, Ilana perceived Mohammed as a reserved individual who hesitated on dates, jumped between topics, or fell silent, giving the impression of being introverted. However, it was later discovered that his behavior was not due to shyness but rather a lack of interest. Unbeknownst to Ilana, Mohammed was seeing another woman at the time and intentionally kept this a secret. When Ilana discovered she had a rival, she became resolute in her determination to be the only woman in his life. The first year of their relationship was tumultuous, with they breaking up on 3 separate occasions, rekindling. This was largely due to Ilana's persistence in pursuing the relationship. Despite her parents' awareness of the issues and their encouragement to leave Muhammad, Ilana remained resolute, convinced that she had found her soulmate. Ilana often showered Muhammad with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only sporadically reciprocated her affection. Muhammad seemed content to accept Ilana's displays of love without feeling obligated to return them. This dynamic created an emotional imbalance, where Ilana grew increasingly dependent on Muhammad. In the summer of 2004, Ilana and Muhammad received unexpected news: Ilana unplanned pregnancy. A sudden life-changing event forced them to rethink their future plans. While both were anxious about the news, Muhammad felt a strong obligation to marry Ilana before the baby was born, as is traditional in his conservative Muslim upbringing. In September 2004, they had a 2-part wedding. The first ceremony adhered to Muhammad's family's cultural customs, while the second was a more casual celebration with friends at a popular restaurant. At the time, the newlyweds seemed happy and in love. However, their happiness was short-lived. When their daughter, Yasmin, was born in January 2005, their marital problems became apparent. Muhammad's focus on his career and education left Ilana and their newborn daughter feeling neglected. To make matters worse, Muhammad had been hoping for a son and wasn't afraid to express his disappointment. This marked the beginning of a troubled marriage that would ultimately end in tragedy. After having her child, Ilana took maternity leave to care for her daughter and manage the household. When Muhammad returned home, he would often go straight to his room and spend very little time with his wife and children, which left Ilana feeling abandoned and unappreciated. As time passed, Muhammad's behavior worsened, and he became increasingly critical and abusive. He would insult Ilana's appearance, refuse to eat her cooking, berating and insulting his wife. Despite her growing unhappiness, Ilana chose not to confide in anyone, including her close friends and parents, about her marital problems. However, one day, while Ilana was on the phone with her mother, Muhammad returned home in a bad mood and began berating Ilana in front of her mother. Ilana's mother tried to defend her, but Muhammad shifted the blame onto Ilana, claiming she was responsible for their troubled marriage. Ilana's mother advised her to end the relationship with Muhammad and file for divorce, but Ilana declined, hoping that she could still salvage the marriage. Unfortunately, Muhammad's actions worsened, and he started physically harming Ilana on top of the verbal abuse she had already been enduring. The situation reached a boiling point in the summer of 2005 when Muhammad punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. Fearing for her safety and that of her child, Ilana fled to friends and reported the incident to the police, finally deciding to end the marriage and leave Muhammad for good. Muhammad surprisingly begged his wife, Ilana, to come back, vowing to never physically abuse her again or even raise his voice. He promised that their family life would be perfect and he would control his temper. However, Muhammad's sudden change of heart was motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to start at Duke University, working towards his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would ruin his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he successfully convinced Ilana to drop the charges against him. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would pursue his studies. Ilana's loved ones were confused when she didn't leave her husband despite the difficulties she was facing. Instead, she moved to another country with Muhammad. When they encouraged her to reconsider, she stood her ground. When the family settled in the US, life appeared more tranquil for a time. Muhammad earned a highly competitive spot in an elite engineering program. Meanwhile, Ilana joined Duke University on a full tuition scholarship, their relationship grew stronger and became more confident in their decision to have more children. After the arrival of their daughter Fiza, they welcomed another child. Unlike their son's relatively smooth birth, Fiza's delivery was more challenging. The new addition to the family brought immense joy, and they felt grateful for their family growing closer. What secrets lay hidden behind the perfect facade of this family? In the late summer of 2009, Ilana and her husband, along with their children, returned to Ottawa, Canada, and settled back into their home. Ilana, however, soon ended her maternity leave and secured a job as a family doctor at a renowned hospital, quickly building a solid reputation. Her husband, meanwhile, juggled work, studies, and teaching at a university. As social media gained popularity in the late 2000s, they started a personal blog that portrayed them as an ideal family. They shared photos of their vacations, accomplishments in science, and luxury lifestyle, complete with a lavish home. They even posted about attending prestigious conferences and trendy resorts. To outsiders, they seemed like a happy, successful, wealthy, and deeply in love couple with no problems. However, this perfect image hid a dark reality. Behind closed doors, Mohammed continued to exert strict control over Ilana. He monitored her interactions, dictated what she wore, and even checked her email and social media accounts. He openly criticized her appearance, style, and parenting methods, leaving Ilana feeling silent and trapped. As time passed, the tension and aggression between them became stressed, with Mohammed frequently yelling at Ilana and blaming her for their arguments and discord. In 2011, a prestigious medical center in Calgary offered a talented neurosurgeon, Mohammed, a fellowship in spinal surgery. Mohammed accepted the offer and relocated to Calgary, but he had to leave his family in Ottawa because his wife, Ilana, couldn't take a leave of absence from her job for over a year. They had to manage a long-distance relationship. During one of Mohammed's visits home, their relationship faced its biggest challenge yet. While at home, Mohammed accidentally left his laptop open, and Ilana saw a message from another woman on his social media account. The content of the message implied a romantic involvement. When Ilana confronted Mohammed, he confessed to having an affair, which was a devastating blow to Ilana. Ilana's family believed that this was the final straw, and they were convinced that she wouldn't forgive Mohammed again. However, Ilana decided to give their marriage another chance. Mohammed promised to end the affair, and they decided to start fresh in Toronto, where Mohammed had secured a high-paying job. Despite this fresh start, their marital issues persisted. After their move to Toronto, Mohammed expressed his desire to have a son, and Ilana agreed to try again, hoping that a new child would bring stability to their family. In October 2013, they had a son named Marius, a long-awaited addition to their family. Despite the new baby, his behavior towards his wife remained unchanged. Over the next few years, he devoted himself to his medical career, becoming a skilled and respected neurosurgeon known for his ability to tackle complex cases that other doctors avoided. Meanwhile, the wife also advanced in her career, becoming a representative for the Ontario Medical Association. However, the tension between them began to escalate, and his behavior towards his wife became increasingly aggressive. He went beyond verbal abuse, resorting to physical violence against her. During a family ski trip, the wife suffered a deep cut on her arm that required stitches, as well as other injuries. She initially claimed that the injuries were a result of a skiing accident. However, she later confided in her best friend that the injuries were actually inflicted by her husband. Following another heated argument over his latest infidelity, Ilana discovered that her husband, Mohammed, was having an affair with a colleague. After overhearing a suspicious phone conversation, Ilana confronted him, which led to a violent outburst, and he physically abused her. A friend, who was aware of the situation, advised Ilana to end her marriage, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Alana should retaliate by having an affair of her own. Although the suggestion was made in jest, Alana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her unfaithful husband. During the summer of 2016, their relationship continued to deteriorate. Their children were away at camp or staying with their grandparents, leaving Alana and Muhammad to face their marital problems alone. In a surprising turn of events, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary in early September, even sharing the news on social media. However, their happiness was short-lived, as they began discussing divorce just a week later. Despite his marital transgressions, Muhammad refused to acknowledge his actions as grounds for divorce, claiming that he was happy with his current situation. On the other hand, a desperate Alana initiated an affair with a co-worker who had been flirting with her, escalating their relationship turmoil. Elena found herself swept up in a new romance, feeling cherished and adored by her partner. This was a welcome change from her current situation, and she reveled in the long-absent sensation of being loved and desired. However, her personal life was about to take a dramatic turn. A fierce argument erupted in the family on November 25, 2016. Elena informed her husband that their divorce was unavoidable. The following day, she consulted with a divorce attorney and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. While Elena was away, her husband, Muhammad, sent her a series of messages, begging her to reconsider and work on saving their marriage for the sake of their children. Elena returned home on November 30th and made a final phone call to her parents. Although her voice betrayed some anxiety, she reassured them that everything was okay. Unbeknownst to her family, Elena had attempted to call the police that evening, but in her distress, she accidentally misdialed the number, leading to a devastating outcome. On December 1st, Anna tried to contact her daughter Ilana but was unable to reach her. Concerned, Anna called her son-in-law Muhammad to ask what was wrong. Muhammad claimed that Ilana had packed her bags in the middle of the night and left him and their children to be with her lover. However, Anna and her husband were skeptical of Muhammad's story, knowing that their daughter would never abandon her children. They asked a close friend of Ilana's to keep an eye on the Muhammad home while they traveled to Toronto to report Ilana's disappearance to the police. The friend reported that Ilana's car was still parked in the driveway, which only added to the family's concern. When Anna and her husband arrived at their daughter's house, they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. However, Muhammad was agitated and insisted that Ilana was with her lover, repeating the same story he had told the police earlier. After Ilana was reported missing, a shocking discovery was made. The police found a body inside a suitcase. A man walking his dog by the river on December 2nd noticed a new-looking suitcase under a bridge about 24 miles from the suspect Muhammad's home. His curiosity got the best of him, so he opened the suitcase, discovering the body of a blonde woman. The police were immediately notified, and the body was taken to the medical examiner for identification and analysis. Fortunately, identifying the owner of the suitcase was not difficult because the perpetrator had left the luggage tag attached, which still had her name and travel information from her recent trip. Her parents confirmed the identity as Ilana. An autopsy revealed her cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. Additionally, her body showed signs of abuse with multiple bruises and abrasions. Notably, the victim was found dressed in pajamas with no shoes. Considering the victim's position in clothes, it appears she was placed inside the suitcase immediately after her death. The investigation led to the suspect's arrest later that evening at a coffee shop. Evidence indicated he was planning to leave the country. A lawyer accompanied the suspect during his meeting at the time of arrest. However, law enforcement thwarted the escape. Subsequently, Muhammad, the prime witness turned suspect, was arrested, formally charging him with Ilana's first-degree murder. Muhammad denied any involvement in the incident, but a disturbing detail soon came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unintentionally witnessed her mother's murder. Yasmin reported hearing screams and noise coming from her parents' room, prompting her to rush there. She opened the door slightly and saw her father kneeling behind the bed, while her mother was likely on the floor, out of her sight. Muhammad ordered Yasmin to leave the room immediately, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told his daughters that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had occurred, but she couldn't fathom that her father was responsible for her mother's death. To avoid putting his daughter through the trauma of testifying in court, the accused confessed to the crime. He recounted the events of that fateful evening, stating that he and his wife had argued over her alleged infidelity and desire for a divorce. Muhammad claimed that he didn't intend to harm his wife, but the situation escalated rapidly. The argument turned violent, and when his wife tried to call the police, he knocked the phone out of her hand. She began screaming, and Muhammad struck her multiple times in the face before pinning her to the floor and strangling her with his hands. Muhammad's daughter entered the room, but couldn't see what had happened behind the bed. By the time Muhammad realized his wife was not breathing, it was too late. In a desperate attempt to revive her, he made a fatal mistake, breaking her neck. Panicked, he placed her body in a large suitcase and drove around for hours, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he stopped at a small bridge over a river and threw the suitcase into the water, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation, hidden in the darkness. During the trial of the surgeon, a scandal emerged involving his father, Ferd Shamji. The elderly man made derogatory comments about his deceased daughter-in-law, trying to justify his son's actions by claiming she had been unfaithful and provoked him. As a result, his medical license was revoked. Muhammad was found guilty of second-degree murder in April 2019 and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he may be eligible for parole in 14 years, considering the time he served during the trial. This means he could be released as early as 2030. Additionally, Muhammad was prohibited from contacting his children or his wife's parents and was ordered to pay them a substantial amount of compensation. His medical license was also permanently revoked, preventing him from practicing medicine or teaching again. The children who have lost their parents are now being cared for by Ilana's parents.